data collection tool is an Excel-based tool that was designed to make it easy for any grantee to collect all of the data that you need to fill out Form A of the PPR. The tool helps clarify exactly what information you need to be collecting, and it does a lot of the calculations for you that need to be completed in Form A of the PPR. So if you're using the tool to track the necessary information that the tool asks for, you'll have accurate numbers to copy and paste and plug into the PPR in the OLDC system. And the tool gives you an Excel-based tool that you have on your computer that provides a record of things that you've submitted in OLDC. So the tool is Excel, which is separate from OLDC, which you need to submit the PPR in. So if you're using the tool, after you fill it out, you still need to go into the OLDC system and enter the data there. This tool will not automatically populate anything into the forms in OLDC, but it will make it easier to gather the data and kind of help you avoid errors to make reporting in the online system easier. Like I mentioned, the tool is an Excel file, and it's posted on the PPR information page of the CED website. So you'll go to the link that you see on the screen here for the PPR information page and select the PPR data collection tool link. And you'll be taken to a separate page that the file lives on. And to actually download the Excel file, you'll want to right-click the document on this page and select Download, and then you can save it to your computer. You want to remember to download it because if you simply click on the file on the page that the link brings you to, you'll get an error message. So you'll want to remember to right-click and download. And if you have any issues accessing the tool, email us at OCS Registrar and we can email it to you. So before I pull up the Excel file and we begin kind of walking through the tabs, I wanted to point out some things that are important to know before you start using the tool. First, you'll need to enable macros on the Excel file or it won't work. You want to remember to fill all requested information out because the calculations are really only as good as the data that you put in. So if you're missing information, it's not going to be accurate. It's a protected file so that you can't inadvertently change or delete any calculations. So just remember to keep it protected. And finally, save your work very often. So as you're entering information, keep hitting save. It's a big file, so if something happens, you want to make sure that you have your data saved. So now we will walk through the tool. So we'll get started on this Start Here tab. So as you can see in the Excel file, there's 7 tabs at the bottom of the screen. And each of the tabs, so the tabs 2, 3, 4, and 5 are those 4 components you need to collect data for. So we'll go through each of these here now, and you'll notice that they're in the specific order that you need to collect this information. You need to enter information about your business, and then keep in mind that you need to have businesses to have positions and positions to have employees. So you'll kind of walk through each tab, and that's how you'll provide the information. So this Start Here tab kind of provides some basic instructions on how to use the tool. You'll notice that in the top right corner here is a light bulb feature, and when you select this icon, a screen will pop up that just provides some kind of basic information on using the tool, an overview of the tabs, and just some general instructions. There's this light bulb feature is on the other tabs of the tool as well. So I'll just show you quickly that you can see the tool them through the other tabs. And we just recommend selecting that light bulb when you get to a new tab and just read through it, read the instructions and the tips so you know what you're doing. So also on the Start Here page, you can let the tool know if you're starting a new grant and you're reporting on it for the first time by selecting starting a new grant option, or if this is a grant that you're reporting on for the second time, the third time, you can continue with an existing grant. So the Start a New Grant option is the option you pick when reporting for the first time on your grant. So if you're going to be using the tool for the grants you just received, then you will select the Start a New Grant option. And when you select the Start a New Grant option, a window box will pop up that allows you to provide that personalized information that I mentioned about the project name and the grant number, so you're able to better kind of customize it to your project, which is especially helpful for those of you with multiple grants. And once you report for the first time, when you report for a future reporting period, you will select that continue with an existing grant option. And this is because you will use the same data collection tool file throughout the life of your grant, and you'll just kind of move through the reporting period. It's really important to select the correct option here, because if you are reporting for an existing grant that's, say, maybe on its third reporting period, but you accidentally select start a new grant, the data that you put into the data collection tool in the past will be overwritten. So if you do accidentally, when you select start a new grant, a warning message will pop up that lets you know if you do select this option, it will override any data that you previously entered. So you just pay attention to that message and make sure you're selecting the right option. And you'll notice a box above the continue with an existing grant section that allows you to select your reporting period throughout the years of your grant. So this is when, if you're continuing to report, you'll select the correct reporting period and provide the correct year in the dropdown. And this is another important step because you want to make sure you select the correct reporting period. And if you're ever not sure when using the tool which options to select or which reporting period to select, before starting, you can just reach out to us at the OCS registrar and we can make sure that you're selecting the right thing. So that is the Start Here option. And now we'll move on to the Business tab. So this is where you'll track all of the businesses that you helped create or expand using your CED funds. So at the top of this page, you'll notice that there's a list of the grant number, the project name, and your reporting period. So this is what I mentioned earlier about kind of how to customize your grant so you know exactly which one that you are looking at. And this allows you as another kind of check to make sure that you're working in the correct reporting period. You'll also notice the light bulb option at the top of the screen, like that was on the Start Here screen. Except for this tab, it's more specific to what you need to enter in for businesses. So again, use this light bulb tool as you're going through the tab if you have questions, or kind of just to give you an overview of what to enter in. And again, save often as you update the tool. So now we'll go through kind of how to fill out the Business tab. So you'll notice here there's some pre-populated information that the grantee entered the 3 businesses that they created and expanded with their grant. So in the first tab here, you enter in the name of your business. And then in the second column, there's a drop-down where you can identify whether it's a business that has been created new or it's been expanded. Then you'll need to enter the creation or the expansion date of the business. And remember that the creation or expansion date for a business will be the same as the date that the first position was created. There's also a column for the closing date, which you only need to fill out if the business closed throughout your grant. So you'll see here the mechanic shop closed on 3/1/2018, so they entered a closing date here. But if your business is still open, you leave this blank. So one thing that you'll notice on this screen that is another benefit of the data collection tool is that there's a data validation section. So to kind of help avoid any data entry issues and ensure the accuracy of the information, some safeguards are built into the tool. So it'll alert you when information is missing or is invalid. Or if you don't enter data into a required field or it produces an error message, the cell will highlight in yellow and it will let you know what the error is in this data validation column over here. So for instance, if I create a new business and I forget to enter any information except the name of the business, so if it's a grocery store, but I don't select whether it was created or expanded, or I don't enter a creation date, I'll get these highlighted cells that alerts me that it's either information that's missing or wrong, and then in the data validation error section, it lets me know that I need to create I need to select whether it was created or expanded, and then I need to enter a creation or expansion date. So these are helpful little data validations that are built into the tool throughout to just make sure that the information that you enter is accurate. So once you have your business information in the Business tab, you can move on to the Positions tab. And again, you'll see that we pre-populated some examples for you. So this is where you'll keep track of all the positions that you create. So the first column is the business column. And what this does is it pre-populates from the previous tab. So that's why you want to make sure that you include all businesses created or expanded, and allows you to select a business and then enter the name of the position. So when it comes to entering the name or the title of the position, we have a few tips for you. So it's probable that you're going to have similar positions. So if you open a shoe store, you're probably going to have multiple sales associates, or if you open a grocery store, you're probably going to have multiple cashiers. But you want to make sure that you get credit for each new position that you create. So to kind of differentiate between similar positions, like clerk A or clerk B, you want to use kind of like a letter identification at the end of the position name. So for example, if I hire a new sales associate at my shoe store, in the business field, I answer Nick's shoe store. And then if I hired another sales associate, I will name the position Nick Sales Associate C, because I already have Nick Sales Associate A and B. And then you also want to enter a creation date for the position created, which has to be at least on or after the date that the business was created. So it looks like here the first sales associate was hired on October 1st, and the second was hired on December 24th. So say we hired the new sales associate on January 1st. I'll enter my creation date. The position hasn't ended yet, so I'm going to leave this blank. If the position does end, you'll want to add an end date here, but if it's ongoing, you'll keep that blank. And the next set of columns, these four, you will indicate whether a position has some benefits. So this is healthcare, sick leave, retirement, and profit sharing. So if the position does offer these benefits to the employee, you can indicate that by selecting, you'll enter Y in the field. And if the position doesn't offer that benefit, you can leave it blank. And then you'll notice that I have a highlighted cell here because it means that there's some missing information and that the status of the position is required. So here you'll indicate whether the job is full-time or part-time. And there is one indicator in the PPR that asks you about part-time jobs, so you'll want to make sure that you select the status, but most of the jobs that you'll be creating will be for full-time employees. One thing that's important to note is that the same position might be held by a number of individuals over time. So you might have a position created that has a couple employees cycling through, and you'll want to ensure that you record that because you can have multiple employees cycle through one position. And we'll talk more about that next when we go through the Employees tab. The Positions tab also has some data validations built in that make sure that all the information is correct. So one example is when I entered this new shoe store position, if I go back to my Business tab, the shoe store was created on October 1st. So as I'm entering my data, if I make a mistake and I enter that this position was created September 20th, 2017, I'll get a data error that says position creation date is before business start date, and here it reminds you what your business start date was, so you can go back and edit that information, which is helpful. Because when you go enter the data into the PPR in the system, if you do enter this information incorrectly, it'll throw you a data error anyway. So this kind of helps you fix the errors before you go through the online system. So next we'll go to the Employees tab. So this is where you keep track of the individuals that are hired into the positions that you created. So again, as you go through each tab, the information begins to populate as a dropdown. So here in the business column, if I need to add a new employee, I select the business that I want to associate the position with. So I want to add my new position for my new sales associate. So in the current position dropdown in the Employees tab, I will select that sales associate C that I created. And what you can see here is how important it is to actually differentiate the positions with this letter designation, because if you just have a sales associate without the identification of which one it is, you won't be able to track the data. The next column is your employee name or identification number. So since this tool is for you, OCS never sees this. It's kind of for your own records. You can enter actually their actual names, or you can give them an employee ID number, which I think a lot of people do as well. But whatever you are comfortable entering in, just to identify the employees. And again, you want to enter in the start date and end date. And as with the other tabs, the start date has to be at least the date that the position was created, except for if it's a new employee that might have started after. So here, this employee started on the 1st. So that was their start date. So I'll enter that here. And again, if I entered a date that was before the position was created, if I entered the 30th, the 20th of December, I would get the error message that says the start date is before position created date. So another helpful check that is included in the tool. You'll also put the end date for the employee. So if an employee leaves the position, you track the end date here, and this gives you an idea of kind of how long the employee was in the position for, which is an indicator that you'll have to complete in Form A. The next set of questions asks you to enter Y or leave blank if it applies. So if this employee was trained with the CED funds, I'll select Y. If they received a certification for the position, in this case, let's say no, so I'll leave that blank. If they are a TANF recipient, I'll select Y. And whether or not they are low income. And remember, there's only one indicator that collects data for non-low income individuals in the data collection tool and the PPR. So this is really important to make sure you include whether or not they're low income, because it will affect how that data is calculated for that indicator that asks for information on non-low income people. So enter Y if it applies, leave blank if it does not. And the next column is hourly starting wage. So this you'll enter as a dollar amount, and you'll enter that once because it's asking for the starting wage, and it shouldn't change over time. So even if this person gets a raise down the road, you want to only include the starting wage, and you'll want to enter that as a dollar amount. If you have a micro enterprise or a self-employment kind of business, you might not have a firm calculation on that wage, and if that's the case, you should leave that blank. And the reason you should leave it blank rather than entering 0 is because this is calculated as an average in the PPR. So if you throw in that 0, it'll throw the average off and it won't be correct. So if you're not sure, you don't have a firm kind of handle on what that hour wage would be, just leave it blank, and you can explain anything like that in the Form B of the PPR in the system. So one thing, so let's say this was a $10 starting wage. You'll enter that as a dollar amount. If the employee received a raise, you can select Y, or if they're promoted, you can enter Y. And you only do this once. So if they receive multiple raises, there's no way to track that. So you'll just enter Y in that field once. One thing I have mentioned is kind of how to track when many employees kind of go through a position over time. And that's okay. There can be multiple employees that fill a position, but only one employee can be in that position at one time. So if someone is replacing an employee in an existing position, you reflect that here on the Employees tab. But if you have a new employee that's fulfilling a new position, you'll need to add that position in the Positions tab like we did with the Sales Associate C for the shoe store. So if you look at the NICS stalker position in row 7, which ended 10/31, and then the NICS stalker position was filled on the 1st of November. So to kind of track an employee filling an existing position, you'll just add an end date to the employee that left, and then you'll add that employee fulfilling that position in the Employees tab. So the first 3 tabs, the business, position, and employees, is where you'll put in the majority of your data. So you kind of want to pay extra attention that your dates are correct and the information is correct, because this is what will calculate most of the information for your PPR. The final tab that you'll enter data in is for leverage funds, if this applies to your project, which it might for your project, but it might not. And it's where you'll track any additional funding that you've secured. So here you'll list the leveraging source, the source type, and the amount of the leveraged funds. And the data collection tool will calculate the total amount of leverage funds for you in your data tab, which is the final tab that we'll look at next. So say you received a loan from a bank. I'll enter the source, so I'll enter the name of the bank. You'll notice I got the error message that said I didn't enter a source type. So let's say it was a loan for $100,000. And that also the applicant provided some private leveraging for $100,000. So I enter each leveraged source individually, and then the data collection tool will roll that information up for you, so you have a total amount that you can look at to make sure that your leveraged amounts are correct. The next tab, Data for Form A, is what you need to populate for Form A. So for those of you that have seen Form A before, you'll notice that this tab looks almost identical to the online forms that you have in OLBC, which makes kind of copying and pasting the information that you provided pretty easy. So this tab calculates the data based on what you entered into the previous tabs. So some of the indicators are more straightforward, like how many businesses you created, that you can pretty easily calculate on your own. But the more involved indicators that deal with job retention and longevity will be calculated here for you to make sure that the information is correct. So that's why it's very important to make sure that you're entering accurate creation and end dates. So at this point, you're almost done, and it's a good kind of practice to make sure that you have selected the correct reporting period from that start menu, because it is critical that you have selected the reporting period dates that are correct, since many of the calculations are based on the date for which you're reporting. So a good practice is just to always remember before finalizing any of your data, you ensure that you've selected the correct reporting period. You'll also want to review the data in this tab closely and make sure that the information makes sense to you and that there are no errors. The data collection tool has those data validations built into it that we mentioned, but you still want to do your own close review to make sure that the data that was calculated does make sense. And at this point, you can go into the online data collection system and actually submit your data, and you'll use this tab to populate Form A. you'll notice that there is a click to finalize your records button here. And what that does is it finalizes all the information that you entered into the tool and will populate the records tab, which we'll look at next. We strongly recommend not finalizing your records until you have submitted your report in OLDC and it's been accepted by your program specialist. This is because the Finalize Your Records button populates this records tab, and once you select it, you can't make any edits. So say you submit your PPR and your program specialist has a question about one of the businesses that you created and wants you to go back and change some of your data. If you've already selected the Click to Finalize Your Records tab, you won't be able to edit that. So just as a good practice, don't finalize your records until your PPR has been accepted in the system. So this records tab, this is really for your records only, just to kind of keep that data on your computer that you can look at what you entered for each reporting period over time, and just to kind of refer back to while you're entering this data throughout the reporting period. So the order that we really strongly suggest that you follow when using the tool is that throughout the 6-month reporting period, you're entering data into your tool. So if a new business is created, a new employee is hired, that you're entering this information on an ongoing basis rather than having to go back and remember what happened over a 6-month period when your report is due. That way, when you get to April and October, you can just kind of do a final check on your data and enter in that information in the online system. Then you can go back once it's submitted and accepted and finalize your data, so it will highlight in this tab of the tool. And then remember to save your workbook and kind of as you're adding on existing information, the tool will calculate it for you, which makes submitting twice a year a lot easier. So remember, always check your data before you enter into the online system. Make sure everything is correct. Update your records on a regular basis so you don't have to kind of go back and try and back count everything. And you'll use the same tool throughout your grant.